Welcome to Mystery Tales, Alex. Settle in with a cup of tea, dear listeners, as we embark on a leisurely journey into the world of classic mystery. Today, we're diving into an original tale inspired by the Queen of Crime herself, Agatha Christie. This is The Vanishing Bride of Shepherd's Croft, a Miss Marple death story. It's a long one, over 90 minutes of slow, deliberate narration to help you relax and unwind. We'll explore the foggy English countryside of the 1920s where secrets lurk behind every hedgerow. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Shepherd's Croft. In the crisp autumn of 1927, the English countryside wore its seasonal finery like a well-tailored gown, golden leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. Hedgerows heavy with blackberries and the distant lowing of cattle echoing across the rolling hills. It was a time when motor cars were beginning to rumble along narrow lanes, challenging the supremacy of horse-drawn carriages, and the echoes of the Great War still lingered in the minds of many, like a fog that refused to lift entirely. Wireless radios crackled with jazz from London, but out here in the rural depths, life moved at a more deliberate pace, governed by ancient traditions and the rhythms of the land. Shepherd's Croft, the estate at the heart of our tale, stood as a proud sentinel amid this pastoral serenity. Nestled in the verdant downs of Wiltshire, about an hour's train ride from the bustling streets of London. It was a sprawling Georgian manor house that had graced the Hargreaves family for over 2 centuries. The architecture was a symphony of symmetry and elegance, a facade of warm bath stone, punctuated by tall sash windows that gleamed in the sunlight, and a portico supported by slender columns where visitors might alight from their conveyances. Ivy climbed the walls in artful tendrils, not overtaking but enhancing the sense of timelessness, as if the house itself were rooted in the earth like the ancient oaks that lined the winding driveway. The estate encompassed some 500 acres, fields dotted with grazing sheep, hence the Croft in its name, a nod to the old shepherd's huts scattered about, formal gardens bursting with late-blooming roses and chrysanthemums, and a small woodland where pheasants rustled in the underbrush. At the rear, a croquet lawn sloped gently toward a ha-ha wall, beyond which the land fell away into misty valleys. The interiors were no less grand. A grand entrance hall with a checkerboard marble floor, a drawing room adorned with Chippendale furniture and portraits of stern Hargreaves ancestors gazing down with disapproving eyes, a library stuffed with leather-bound tomes on everything from agriculture to ancient history, and a dining room where crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls. It was here, amid preparations for what was billed as the wedding of the season, that our story truly begins. The groom, too, Geoffrey Hargreaves, was the young master of Shepherd's Croft, a handsome fellow in his late 20s with fair hair that caught the light like wheat in summer, and a smile that could charm the birds from the trees. He had inherited the estate upon his father's untimely death 5 years prior, a shipping magnate who had perished in a boating accident off the Cornish coast. Geoffrey's goblet was full, a fortune from investments, a pedigree that opened doors in society, and now a bride who promised to bring fresh vitality to the old halls. The bride-to-be, Miss Eleanor Vance, was a striking contrast to the staid traditions of the countryside. At 25, she hailed from a modest but respectable family in London's Kensington district. Her father a solicitor, her mother long faded from influenza. Eleanor had bobbed her raven-black hair in the flapper style that was all the rage, her emerald green eyes sparkling with the mischief of the city. She had met Geoffrey during the previous season, at a debutante ball where the champagne flowed and the orchestra played foxtrots till dawn. "He swept me off my feet," she would later confide to friends, though whispers suggested it was her wit and independence that truly ensnared him. Eleanor was no wilting violet. She had opinions on women's suffrage, enjoyed motoring in her own little Austin Swallow, and dreamed of modernizing Shepherd's Croft with electric lights, and perhaps even a gramophone in every room. The wedding was set for the following Saturday, a grand affair with 200 guests, a string quartet, and a menu featuring roast ou en cocotte, roast pheasant, and a towering croquembouche for dessert. Invitations had been sent on thick cream cardstock, embossed with the family crest, a shepherd's crook entwined with roses. But not all invitations were born of joy. Some carried the weight of obligation, and one, in particular, would draw an unexpected sleuth into the fray. Enter Miss Jane Marple, that gentle spinster from the quaint village of St. Mary Mead, some miles to the east. Miss Marple was a woman of indeterminate age, somewhere past 60, with soft white hair pinned neatly under a sensible hat, twinkling blue eyes that missed nothing, and a demeanor as unassuming as a cup of weak tea. She lived in a rose-covered cottage, tended her garden with devotion, and occupied her time with knitting, the Women's Institute, and an uncanny knack for unraveling the knots of human mischief. Her nephew, Raymond West, the modernist novelist with his pipe and avant-garde ideas, had been the one to extend the invitation. It happened over a leisurely afternoon tea in her parlor, where the fire crackled merrily and scones steamed on a three-tiered stand. Raymond, ever the enthusiast, paced the room with his usual energy. "Aunt Jane, you simply must come to Shepherd's Croft. Geoffrey Hargreaves is a chap I knew at Oxford, decent sort, loaded, of course. And his fiancée, Eleanor Vance, is a peach. The estate's a dream. You'll love poking about the gardens. Besides, there might be some real-life drama to inspire your observations." Miss Marple set down her teacup with a soft clink, her knitting needles pausing mid-stitch. She was working on a woolen scarf in shades of heather, a gift for the vicar's wife. "Drama, Raymond? At a wedding? Oh, I think not. Weddings are occasions of joy, though I suppose human nature being what it is, there's always a touch of the unexpected. But the country air might do my rheumatism good, and I've heard Wiltshire honey is divine." Raymond chuckled, knowing his aunt's propensity for seeing through facades. "Exactly, you're always saying people are the same everywhere, village or manor. Pack your bags. The train leaves Friday." And so, with a small valise containing her best woolens, a volume of Jane Austen for the journey, and her ever-present curiosity, Miss Marple boarded the Great Western Railway at Paddington Station. The train chugged through the suburbs, past chimney stacks and terraced houses, then into the open fields where sheep grazed and church spires pierced the sky. She watched the world slide by, noting the harried faces of commuters, the flirtations of young couples in the compartments, and the way a porter sneaked a sip from a flask when he thought no one saw. People, she mused silently, are like puzzles. Piece them together wrongly and the picture distorts. Arrival at the local station, a quaint affair with hanging baskets of petunias, was met with the Hargreaves motor car, a gleaming Rolls-Royce silver ghost driven by a uniformed chauffeur. The drive to the estate wound through villages with thatched cottages and pubs advertising ale, the air growing fresher with each mile. As Shepherd's Croft came into view, Miss Marple couldn't help but admire its grandeur. Such a responsibility, she thought, maintaining all this in these modern times. Geoffrey greeted her personally at the door, his face lighting up with genuine warmth. "Miss Marple, Raymond's aunt, splendid. We've heard tales of your sharpness. Come in, come in. Eleanor's eager to meet you." The hall smelled of beeswax polish and fresh flowers, enormous arrangements of lilies and ferns for the wedding. Eleanor descended the grand staircase like a vision, her day dress of silk chiffon swishing softly. "Miss Marple, how delightful. Raymond speaks so highly of you. Do tell me about St. Mary Mead. I've only ever known London bustle." Over tea in the drawing room, a space of faded brocade sofas, a grand piano, and French windows opening to the terrace. Miss Marple learned more of the household. Mrs. Lydia Hargreaves, Geoffrey's mother, presided like a queen dowager. In her mid-50s, with iron gray hair pinned in a severe bun and a lace collar high at her neck, she embodied the old guard. "We Hargreaves have standards," she said crisply, pouring tea with precision. "Eleanor's a dear girl, but city ways take adjusting." Uncle Victor Hargreaves, Lydia's brother-in-law, lounged in an armchair, a portly figure of 60 with a florid complexion and a mustache that twitched when he laughed. He had lost his own fortune in speculative ventures post-war, rubber plantations in Malaya that failed, and now resided at the Croft on sufferance. "Weddings cost a pretty penny," he boomed, accepting a cucumber sandwich. "In my day, we kept it simple." Amelia Hargreaves, Geoffrey's younger sister, hovered nearby, a pale, pretty girl of 22 with mousy hair and a nervous habit of twisting her handkerchief. She had been educated at home, overshadowed by her brother, and harbored dreams of escape to London. "I'm handling the flowers," she said softly to Miss Marple, her eyes flicking to Eleanor with something akin to envy. "Eleanor has such taste, doesn't she?" The staff moved like shadows. Clara, the head housemaid, a robust woman in her 40s with capable hands and a no-nonsense air, who had served since girlhood. Tom Wilkins, the gardener, glimpsed through the window, a grizzled man with a limp from the trenches tending the borders with quiet intensity. And Reverend Silas Thorne, the vicar, arrived later for tea, a thin ascetic in clerical black, his wire spectacles glinting as he discussed the ceremony. As the afternoon waned, Miss Marple was shown to her guest room on the second floor. A cozy chamber with chintz curtains, a four-poster bed, and a view over the Croft where sheep dotted the fields like cotton puffs. Unpacking, she heard snippets of conversation drifting up. Geoffrey and Eleanor laughing in the garden, Amelia's sharp retort to her mother, Uncle Victor's grumble about expenses. Dinner that evening was a formal affair in the dining room, candlelight dancing on silver epergnes laden with fruit. The menu: clear soup, poached salmon, lamb cutlets with mint sauce, and apple charlotte for pudding. Conversation flowed, Geoffrey toasting the future, Eleanor sharing London anecdotes, Reverend Thorne quoting scripture on matrimony. But Miss Marple observed the undercurrents, Mrs. Hargreaves' tight smile when Eleanor mentioned modernizing, Amelia's downcast eyes, Uncle Victor's lingering gaze on the wine decanter, Clara's quick glance at Victor, familiar perhaps. Tom served briefly, his war medal pinned to his waistcoat, muttering about the weather. As port was passed and stories told, Uncle Victor regaling with a tale of the estate's legend, a bride who vanished in 1727 on her wedding eve, cursed by a shepherd's ghost. Miss Marple smiled inwardly. Legends often for the fireside, she thought, but real mysteries are in the living. Retiring to her room, the house settling with creaks and sighs, Miss Marple knitted by the fire, unaware that the seeds of a true vanishing were already sown. The stage was set, the players assembled, and the curtain about to rise on intrigue most foul. Chapter 2. The Eve of the Wedding. Ah, dear listeners, as we settle deeper into our armchairs, the fire perhaps crackling softly. In the background, let's continue our tale with Chapter 2. The stage is set at Shepherd's Croft, and the air grows thicker with anticipation, and perhaps a hint of unease. Remember, this is a slow unraveling, like peeling layers from an onion, each revealing a sharper scent. If you're enjoying the deliberate pace, do give a thumbs up and share in the comments. Have you ever attended a grand country wedding? What hidden dramas did you spot? Now, on we go. The day before the wedding dawned with a promise of perfection, or so it seemed to the inhabitants of Shepherd's Croft. The autumn sun filtered through a veil of thin clouds, casting a golden haze over the Wiltshire Downs, where the mist lingered in the hollows like forgotten dreams. Birds, thrushes, and blackbirds trilled from the hedgerows, and the scent of dew-kissed grass mingled with the earthy aroma of turned soil from the gardens. It was Friday, the eve of the nuptials, and the estate buzzed with a controlled chaos that only the upper classes could orchestrate without descending into pandemonium. Servants scurried like ants in a well-ordered hill, footmen polishing the silver until it gleamed like moonlight on water, housemaids fluttering dusters over ornate cornices, and the cook, a formidable woman named Mrs. Beeton, no relation to the famous authoress, though she fancied herself one, bellowing orders in the vast kitchens below stairs. The wedding marquee, a grand tent of striped canvas, had been erected on the south lawn the previous day, its poles festooned with garlands of ivy and white ribbons that fluttered in the breeze. Inside, tables were being set with fine bone china, crystal stemware that caught the light in rainbow prisms, and centerpieces of hothouse flowers. Roses from the conservatory, lilies imported from Covent Garden, and delicate ferns that spoke of luxury in every frond. Eleanor Vance, the bride-to-be, was the eye of this whirlwind. She arose early, as was her city habit, slipping into a simple day dress of pale blue crêpe de chine that hugged her slender figure and accentuated her bobbed raven hair. A pearl necklace, a gift from Geoffrey, adorned her throat, and her emerald eyes sparkled with a mix of excitement and nerves. She took breakfast in the morning room, a sunlit space with French doors opening to the terrace, where she nibbled on toast and marmalade while poring over the final guest list. 212, she murmured to Clara, who poured coffee with steady hands. Aunt Lydia insists on inviting the county set, but I've snuck in a few London friends for levity. Clara, the loyal housemaid, nodded with a warm smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. In her 40s, with a sturdy build honed by years of service and hands calloused from scrubbing floors, she had been with the Hargreaves since she was a girl of 16. Her uniform, a crisp black dress with white apron and cap, was impeccable, but Miss Marple, observing from the doorway where she had come for her own tea, noted the faint weariness in Clara's posture. "A big day tomorrow, miss," Clara said. "The house hasn't seen such doing since Master Geoffrey's christening." Eleanor laughed lightly, a sound like tinkling bells. "Oh, Clara, you've been a godsend with the linens and all. Whatever would we do without you?" There was genuine affection there, but Miss Marple caught a fleeting shadow in Clara's expression. Gratitude mixed with something guarded, perhaps a secret tucked away like a pressed flower in a Bible. Outside, Geoffrey Hargreaves oversaw the grounds with boyish enthusiasm. Dressed in tweeds and brogues, he conferred with Tom Wilkins, the gardener, amid the rose beds where blooms nodded heavy heads. Tom, a man in his 50s with a grizzled beard and a pronounced limp from a shrapnel wound at the Somme, leaned on his spade, his eyes squinting against the sun. "The lawns are mowed smooth as a billiard table, sir," he grunted, his voice rough as gravel. "And them flower borders, Eleanor's favorites, the hybrid teas." Geoffrey clapped him on the shoulder. "Jolly good, Tom. Wouldn't do to have a weed in sight for the photographs." But Tom's response was a mere nod, his gaze drifting toward the old shepherd's hut on the distant Croft, a ramshackle stone structure half swallowed by brambles, a remnant of the estate's pastoral past. Miss Marple, taking her morning constitutional along the gravel paths lined with yew hedges clipped into precise shapes, paused to watch. Tom had a secretive air, she thought, much like old Mr. Harbottle in St. Mary Mead, who hoarded his war medals and tales alike. Amelia Hargreaves, Geoffrey's sister, was tasked with the floral arrangements, a duty she undertook with reluctant precision in the conservatory. A glass-domed wonder filled with the humid scent of orchids and citrus trees. At 22, Amelia was a faded watercolor beside Eleanor's vibrant oil painting. Pale skin, mousy brown hair pinned back severely, and eyes that darted like a cornered fawn's. She snipped stems with silver shears, arranging vases of white lilies and baby's breath. But her movements were jerky, betraying inner turmoil. "These will do for the altar," she said to Eleanor, who had joined her briefly. "Though Mother thinks roses more traditional." Eleanor's smile was kind but firm. "Lilies for purity, Amelia dear. And they've always been my favorite." A pause then. "You've been such a help. After the wedding, perhaps we can plan a trip to London together. Shows, shopping. Make you a proper debutante at last." Amelia's lips thinned. "London? With you lording over the estate? I think not." The words slipped out sharper than intended, hanging in the air like the conservatory's moist heat. Eleanor raised an eyebrow but let it pass, excusing herself to check on the dressmaker who had arrived from Salisbury for final fittings. Mrs. Lydia Hargreaves held court in the drawing room, directing the placement of extra chairs and tutting over the caterer's samples. Her lace collar was starched to perfection, her gray hair coiled like a crown. "No deviations from the menu," she instructed the butler, a dignified man named Hargrove, no relation, mercifully. "The pheasant must be shot from our own woods. Tradition, you see." Uncle Victor, sprawled in a wingback chair with a newspaper concealing his mid-morning tipple, chuckled heartily. "Tradition? That's code for expensive, Lydia. This shindig will bleed the estate dry." Mrs. Hargreaves shot him a withering glance. "And whose fault is that, Victor? Your investments have done enough bleeding." Victor Hargreaves, portly and red-faced, with a waistcoat straining at the buttons, waved a dismissive hand. He had arrived a fortnight early, ostensibly to help, but more to avail himself of the cellars. His room in the east wing overlooked the stables, where he spent afternoons in the billiard room, cue in one hand, glass in the other. Reverend Silas Thorne arrived mid-morning for a rehearsal of the vows, his clerical collar stark against his thin neck, wire-rimmed spectacles perched on a beak-like nose. He was a man of 50-odd, ascetic and scholarly, with a voice like dry leaves rustling. "Marriage is a sacred bond," he intoned to Geoffrey and Eleanor in the estate's small chapel, a stone edifice adjacent to the house with stained glass windows depicting shepherds and lambs. "Forsaking all others in sickness and in health." His eyes lingered on Eleanor a moment too long, a flicker of old acquaintance. Rumor had it he had courted her briefly in London years ago before her rise in society. Miss Marple, ever the observer, joined the group for luncheon on the terrace. Cold cuts, salads, and chilled white wine from the Rhine. The conversation meandered. Geoffrey enthusing about honeymoon plans in the Riviera, Eleanor sharing tales of jazz clubs, Amelia picking at her plate in silence. Uncle Victor regaled with bawdy stories of his youth, earning reproofs from Mrs. Hargreaves. Tom Wilkins was glimpsed hauling compost, Clara bustling with trays, and even the local constable Perkins stopped by to discuss security for the event, a nod to post-war anxieties about thieves or anarchists. As afternoon tea was served in the shade of a cedar tree, scones with clotted cream, Victoria sponge cake, and Earl Grey steeped to perfection, tensions simmered subtly. Eleanor confided in Miss Marple over a private moment in the library, surrounded by dusty tomes and the scent of aged leather. The room was a sanctuary, mahogany shelves reaching to the ceiling, a massive fireplace with carved mantels depicting hunting scenes, and deep armchairs inviting confession. "It's all so overwhelming," Eleanor said, sinking into a seat. "Geoffrey's family, they're kind but set in their ways. Amelia resents me, I think, and Uncle Victor, well, he's harmless but always borrowing." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her blue eyes kindly. "My dear, families are like gardens full of weeds among the flowers. In St. Mary Mead I've seen many a match ruffle feathers, but love smooths the thorns eventually. Eleanor nodded, but her hand trembled slightly as she set down her cup. Geoffrey joined them then, stealing a kiss on her cheek. "Darling, the vicar's ready for another run-through." The rehearsal in the chapel was a farce of nerves. Amelia dropping the ring pillow, Uncle Victor hiccuping through a reading, Reverend Thorne fumbling the pronouns. Laughter eased the mood, but Miss Marple noted the glances, Amelia's envy, Thorne's wistfulness, Clara hovering in the shadows with a knowing smile when Victor brushed past her, perhaps too familiarly. As dusk fell, painting the sky in hues of rose and indigo, the household prepared for the eve's dinner. A rehearsal feast to mimic the morrow. Guests trickled in, cousins from Bath, friends from London with their gramophones and cigarettes. The dining room glowed with candlelight, the long mahogany table set with damask cloths, silver epergnes overflowing with fruit, and place cards in elegant script. The menu was sumptuous. Consommé sole and white wine sauce, roast beef with Yorkshire pudding, seasonal vegetables, and a Charlotte russe for dessert. Toasts flowed like the wine, Geoffrey raising a glass to my beautiful bride, Eleanor blushing prettily. Mrs. Hargreaves spoke of family legacy, her voice echoing off the paneled walls adorned with portraits of Hargreaves' forebears, stern men with mutton chops, women in crinolines. Uncle Victor, emboldened by port, launched into the estate's legend again. The vanishing bride of 1727, young thing named Eliza, locked in her room the night before, gone by morning. Found weeks later in the hut, or so they say. Curse of the shepherd's Croft. Laughter rippled, but Eleanor shivered, clutching her napkin. "Don't, Uncle, it's morbid." Reverend Thorne crossed himself subtly. Amelia paled, and Tom, serving the pudding, muttered under his breath about old wives' tales. Miss Marple, seated between Amelia and a distant cousin, observed it all. The way Clara's eyes met Victor's across the table, the Reverend's lingering gaze on Eleanor, Tom's limp as he retreated to the kitchens. Human nature, she reflected, was a tapestry of threads, some golden, some frayed. As the evening wound down, port for the gentlemen in the billiard room, bridge for the ladies in the drawing room, Eleanor excused herself early. "Beauty sleep," she quipped, ascending the grand staircase with its carved banisters. Her suite was at the end of the second-floor corridor, a lavish apartment with a four-poster bed draped in silk, heavy velvet curtains, a dressing table cluttered with powders and perfumes, and French doors to a small balcony overlooking the Croft. Geoffrey escorted her, his hand on her waist. "Tomorrow you're mine forever," he whispered at the door. She kissed him good night, turning the key in the lock, a precaution from her London days, wary of intruders or prying eyes. "Sweet dreams, darling." The house quieted gradually, laughter fading, clocks chiming the hours, the wind whispering through the oaks. Miss Marple retired to her adjacent room, knitting by the gas lamp, her mind turning over the day's vignettes like pages in a book. At midnight, the house asleep under a canopy of stars, a scream shattered the peace, high, terrified, abruptly silenced. Geoffrey bolted from his chamber down the hall, pounding on Eleanor's door. "Eleanor, what is it?" No reply. Doors flew open. Mrs. Hargreaves in curlers and robe, Amelia clutching a shawl, Uncle Victor disheveled and bleary, Reverend Thorne blinking owlishly, Clara with a flickering candle, Tom roused from below stairs. The door held fast, key inside on the dresser visible through the keyhole. Geoffrey and Tom shouldered it open with a splintering crack. The room was in disarray, bed rumpled but empty, lamp overturned on the rug, balcony doors bolted from within, windows latched tight. Eleanor's silk scarf lay discarded on the floor, and her nightgown, gone with her. She's vanished. Geoffrey gasped, face drained of color. Miss Marple, arriving with the others, surveyed the impossible scene, her knitting forgotten. Like the legend, someone whispered. But this was no ghost story. The vanishing bride was real, and the night held its breath for what came next. Chapter 3. The Search and the Discovery. Oh, my dear listeners, how the plot thickens, doesn't it? Like a good English fog rolling in from the moors, enveloping everything in mystery and chill. If Chapter 2 left you on the edge of your seat, or perhaps your cozy blanket, then Chapter 3 will draw you deeper into the enigma of Shepherd's Croft. We'll explore the frantic hours after the vanishing, the whispers of motives, and a discovery that turns whispers into shouts. Take a slow breath, sip your tea, and let's proceed at our leisurely pace, savoring each detail as Miss Marple might. And do tell in the comments, what would you have done first upon hearing that scream? Now on with the tale. The scream that pierced the midnight calm of Shepherd's Croft lingered in the air like an unwelcome ghost, echoing faintly off the paneled walls and high ceilings before dissolving into a stunned silence. It was a sound raw with terror, cut short as if a hand had clamped over the mouth that uttered it, or worse, as if the very night had swallowed it whole. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 12:30, its sonorous bongs underscoring the chaos that erupted in the second-floor corridor. Geoffrey Hargreaves, the groom-to-be, was the first to react fully, his face a mask of panic under the gas lamps that flickered to life as servants scrambled for matches. He had been in his own room, 2 doors down, a masculine chamber with hunting prints on the walls and a decanter of whiskey on the sideboard, unable to sleep from wetting, nerves, or so he would later claim. Bursting forth in his pajamas and dressing gown, he hammered on Eleanor's locked door with fists that bruised. "Eleanor, darling, open up! What was that?" His voice cracked, boyish vulnerability replacing his usual confidence. The door, a solid oak affair with brass fittings polished to a sheen, refused to yield. Through the keyhole, the key glinted mockingly on the inside dresser, just out of reach. Mrs. Lydia Hargreaves appeared next, her iron-gray hair escaping its nighttime pins, her robe clutched tightly at her throat. "Geoffrey, what in heaven's name?" "Eleanor!" Her tone was sharp, imperial even in disarray, but Miss Marple, hurrying from her room with a shawl over her nightdress, noted the tremor in her hands. The matriarch unnerved. Amelia Hargreaves followed, pale as the moonlit sheets, her eyes wide and darting. She clutched a handkerchief as if it were a lifeline, twisting it until the lace frayed. Uncle Victor lumbered in, bleary-eyed and smelling faintly of port, his nightshirt untucked and slippers askew. "What's all this racket? Bad dream, eh?" he blustered, but his ruddy face paled as the gravity sank in. Reverend Silas Thorne, from a guest room further along, adjusted his spectacles with shaking fingers, murmuring a prayer under his breath. Clara the housemaid, ever practical, arrived with a candelabrum that cast long, wavering shadows, her sturdy frame a bulwark amid the fluster. Even Tom Wilkins, roused from his cottage in the grounds via the servants' stairs, limped in, tool belt still at his waist from some midnight repair. "Heard the yell from outside," he grunted, his war-scarred face grim. It was Tom and Geoffrey together who forced the door, their shoulders heaving against the wood until the lock splintered with a crack like a gunshot. The room beyond was a tableau of the impossible. Eleanor's suite, so elegantly appointed just hours before, now bore the marks of intrusion or escape. The four-poster bed was rumpled, sheets twisted as if in a struggle, though no blood stained the linens. The overturned oil lamp had spilled a puddle of kerosene on the Persian rug, its wick still smoldering faintly, acrid smoke curling upward. The balcony doors, French style with iron bolts, were secured from the inside, the key in place. Windows latched tight, curtains undisturbed. The wardrobe stood open, dresses hanging neatly, but Eleanor's nightgown and robe were missing, as was she. A silk scarf, the one she had worn at dinner, lay discarded near the bed, knotted oddly as if yanked free. "She's gone," Geoffrey stammered, sinking to his knees. "How?" "The drop from the balcony is 20 feet to flagstones. No ladder, no footprints below if she jumped." Miss Marple entered last, her sensible slippers padding softly on the threshold. She surveyed the scene with those sharp blue eyes, missing nothing. The faint scuff marks on the carpet, the position of the furniture, the chill draft from the chimney, too narrow even for a child. "Dear me," she said softly, her voice a calm anchor in the storm. "We must search immediately but carefully, touch nothing more." The household mobilized in a frenzy, lanterns and torches fetched from the stables. Geoffrey organized parties, one to scour the house from attics to cellars, another the grounds. Mrs. Hargreaves insisted on propriety, no scandal before the wedding, but the vanished bride demanded action. "She might have wandered off in distress," Amelia suggested faintly, though her tone lacked conviction. Uncle Victor muttered about sleepwalking or elopement, earning glares. Dawn crept in gray and reluctant, the mist thickening over the Croft as if conspiring to hide secrets. The search inside yielded nothing. No hidden panels in the walls. Geoffrey had architects confirm the house's solid construction years ago. No passages behind tapestries. The chimney was probed with pokers, empty save for soot. The balcony, inspected by Tom with a ladder from below, showed no signs of descent. No scraped paint, no disturbed ivy, the ground beneath dew-kissed and unmarked. Outside, the estate sprawled vast and unforgiving. Parties fanned out. Geoffrey and Reverend Thorne toward the woods, their shouts echoing hollowly. Amelia and Clara along the gardens, calling Eleanor's name until voices hoarse. Uncle Victor and Tom to the outbuildings, the stables where horses whinnied nervously, the greenhouses steaming with heat. Miss Marple joined Mrs. Hargreaves in the drawing room, brewing strong tea to steady nerves, but her mind whirred like her knitting needles back home. As the morning wore on, whispers of motives began to surface like bubbles in a simmering pot. Over hurried breakfast in the dining room, eggs and toast untouched by most, the family dissected relationships. Geoffrey, pacing with a brandy flask despite the hour, was heir to everything. Eleanor's modest inheritance from her father would merge with his upon marriage. But if she died, well, it would be his alone. Yet his devastation seemed genuine, eyes red-rimmed, hands trembling. "We argued last week," he confessed to Miss Marple privately in the library, sinking into a leather armchair. "About modernizing the estate. She wanted changes I resisted. But murder? Never." Amelia, pouring tea with unsteady hands, had her own shadows. Days prior, overheard by Clara, she had quarreled with Eleanor over the family jewels, a sapphire necklace passed to brides. "It's mine by right," Amelia had hissed in the conservatory. "You're just an interloper." Envy gleamed in her pale eyes now, but alibis placed her in her room, alone with a headache. Uncle Victor's debts were no secret. He had borrowed from Geoffrey repeatedly, and Eleanor's arrival meant tighter purse strings. "Always cadging for a loan," Mrs. Hargreaves snapped, her lace collar askew. Victor blustered in the billiard room, cue forgotten. "Poppycock, I was 3 sheets to the wind in bed." But Clara's glance at him was knowing, perhaps more than employer-servant familiarity. Clara herself, loyal for decades, had been reprimanded by Eleanor for sloppy work recently, a broken vase, or so it seemed. And Tom Wilkins, the gardener, lurked often near the house. Eleanor had complained of his staring during walks, his war trauma making him unpredictable. "He has a temper," Geoffrey noted. Then there was Reverend Thorne, whose past with Eleanor surfaced in murmurs. a rejected proposal in London 2 years back before Geoffrey. She chose worldly wealth over spiritual guidance, he said stiffly over tea, but his spectacles fogged with emotion. The local constable, Perkins, a portly man with a mustache like a broom and a uniform straining at the buttons, was summoned by motor bicycle, arriving puffed and officious. Now, let's not panic. Elopement, perhaps? Or a prank? He poked about the room with a notebook, measuring the balcony drop, scratching his head at the locked doors. Impossible unless... ghosts? The legend of the 1727 bride was retold, eliciting nervous laughs. By 10 o'clock, the search extended to the farther Croft, the sheep fields where the ground softened into mud from overnight drizzle. Miss Marple, donning stout boots, joined Tom and Geoffrey, her umbrella a parasol against the weak sun. The air was crisp, laced with the woolly scent of livestock and damp earth. People don't vanish without trace, she mused aloud, unless aided or unaided in despair. Noon approached, the sun climbing to burn off the mist, when a shout rent the air from the old shepherd's hut. A mile out, a crumbling stone relic roofed in slate, door hanging ajar on rusty hinges, surrounded by brambles and thistles. Tom had led them there, just in case. Bursting in, flashlight beams cutting the gloom. They found her. Eleanor sprawled on the dirt floor amid straw and cobwebs, her nightgown muddied and torn, the silk scarf knotted tightly around her throat. Strangled, eyes staring sightlessly at the rafters, body cold to the touch, dead for hours, the local doctor would later confirm, rigor mortis setting in. No footprints leading here, Constable Perkins marveled, examining the muddy approach. Rain had softened the earth, yet only their own boots marked it now. How'd she get here? Walked a mile in the dark, screaming back at the house, and no marks inside the room to show she left willingly or was taken. Geoffrey collapsed against the wall, sobbing. Murder. My Eleanor. Amelia fainted into Clara's arms. Uncle Victor turned away to retch. Reverend Thorne prayed fervently. Miss Marple knelt briefly, noting the scarf's knots, tight, deliberate, and a faint bruise on Eleanor's wrist like a grip. Transported here after death? But how from a locked room? Back at the house, Inspector Craddock arrived from the county, a shrewd man with a pipe and a no-nonsense air, sealing the scene. Motives swirled: inheritance, jealousy, rejection, secrets. The impossible crime demanded answers, and Miss Marple, knitting resumed in the drawing room, pondered the human heart's dark capabilities. The wedding was cancelled. Guests sent away with hushed excuses, but the mystery had only begun. How had the bride vanished from a sealed room only to appear strangled afar? Whispers filled Shepherd's Croft, and eyes turned suspicious on one another. Chapter 4. Interrogations and Initial Clues. There we are, dear listeners, nestled in the heart of the mystery now, where the fog of confusion begins to lift ever so slightly, revealing shapes in the shadows. Chapter 3 left us with that chilling discovery in the shepherd's hut. Poor Eleanor's lifeless form, a puzzle wrapped in an enigma. Now in Chapter 4 we delve into the interrogations, those careful probings of the soul that Miss Marple knows so well from her village observations. It's like watching a game of cat's cradle, strings pulling taut with every question. Slow and steady, we'll examine the suspects, unearth the first clues, and sprinkle in those red herrings that make the truth so elusive. If this is keeping you up at night in the best way, do like and subscribe and comment. Who seems guiltiest to you so far? A sip of cocoa, perhaps, and away we go. The afternoon following the discovery dragged heavily at Shepherd's Croft, the estate shrouded not just in autumn mist, but in a pall of grief and suspicion that clung like damp wool. The wedding marquee stood forlorn on the lawn, ribbons drooping, tables uncleared as if frozen in time. Guests had been discreetly dispatched with tales of family emergency, their motor cars churning gravel in hasty retreats. Inside the drawing room, usually a haven of chintz sofas and watercolors, had been commandeered as an impromptu headquarters. Inspector Craddock, a burly man in his 40s with a tweed suit, a perpetual pipe clenched between teeth and eyes like gimlets, set up shop at the mahogany desk. He puffed thoughtfully, smoke curling toward the plaster ceiling rose, while Constable Perkins hovered with his notebook, pencil poised. Miss Marple, invited to stay as a respectable witness, and perhaps because Craddock had heard whispers of her acumen from Scotland Yard connections, sat quietly in a corner armchair, her knitting needles clicking softly, a scarf taking shape in muted blues, her mind far busier than her hands. People reveal so much when questioned, she murmured to herself, recalling similar scenes in St. Mary Mead, the baker's wife and the missing raffle money, or the vicar's verger with his sticky fingers. The interrogations began formally after a somber luncheon of cold meats and pickles, eaten in near silence at the dining table. Mrs. Lydia Hargreaves presided with forced composure, her lace collars replaced by somber black, but her commands still sharp. Cooperate fully, all of you, for Eleanor's sake. The staff bustled subdued, Clara's eyes red-rimmed. Tom Wilkins lurking in doorways. Geoffrey Hargreaves was first ushered in with a gentle but firm hand on his shoulder by Perkins. He looked a wreck, fair hair unkempt, eyes hollow from weeping, his customary tweeds rumpled as if slept in. Sinking into the chair opposite Craddock, he ran a hand through his hair. Ask away, Inspector. Anything to find who did this. Craddock leaned forward, voice gravelly. Timeline, sir. You heard the scream at midnight? Yes. Bolted from bed, pounded on the door. She locked it habitually, you see. London nerves. Geoffrey's voice cracked. We were happy, truly. Loved her spirit. But under probing, cracks appeared. A letter, found tucked in his desk drawer during a search authorized by Mrs. Hargreaves herself. Surfaced, Eleanor's handwriting, dated a week prior. Geoffrey, your resistance to change strains us. The estate's debts worry me. If we merge finances, what then? Geoffrey flushed. A spat, nothing more. Father's shipping losses left burdens. Her dowry would help, yes. But murder for money? Absurd. I'd inherit anyway upon marriage. Miss Marple noted his clenched fists. Grief or guilt? Motive glimmered. Financial strains hidden behind the heir's facade. Next, Amelia Hargreaves, escorted in by Clara, who hovered protectively before being dismissed. Amelia was a ghost of herself, pale cheeks blotched from tears, handkerchief sodden. She perched on the chair's edge like a bird ready to flee. I retired early, headache from the dinner, she whispered. Craddock's eyes narrowed. You quarreled with the deceased over jewels? Amelia's head snapped up. Overheard, were we? Yes, the sapphires, family heirloom for the bride, but she was welcome to them. Her alibi, alone in her room reading a novel by candlelight. No one to confirm. A search of the vanished bride's room had yielded a torn scrap of lace on the floor, matching Amelia's dress from the rehearsal, found snagged perhaps in a struggle. Amelia paled further. Coincidence. I lent her a gown earlier. Red herring or clue? Miss Marple pondered jealousy's bitter root, like Mrs. Dane's envy in the village over the flower show prize. Uncle Victor Hargreaves blustered in next, portly frame filling the doorway, a whiff of brandy trailing him even at midday. He plopped down heavily, mustache twitching. Damned inconvenient this. I was in the billiard room till late. Port and a cigar. Heard nothing till the commotion. Craddock puffed his pipe. Debts, sir? The estate's allowance. Miss Vance's arrival might curtail it. Victor barked a laugh. Everyone knows I gamble a bit. Rubber shares went bust post-war. Borrowed a trifle from Jeffrey, yes. But strangle a girl for it? Preposterous. His boots, caked with garden mud from the search, were size 10, matching a print found near the hut's door, partially obscured by brambles. Walked everywhere this morning, he grumbled. And a whisper from Clara later. Victor had slipped out at 11. For air, seen by a scullery maid. The Reverend Silas Thorne followed, thin and austere, Bible clutched like a shield. His spectacles glinted under the chandelier. A tragedy most profound. I prayed in my room after dinner. Passed with the victim? Craddock pressed. Thorne flushed. A youthful fancy, proposed in London, rejected gently. She sought worldly joys, I the cloth. His motive, spurned love. A prayer book found in Eleanor's suite, inscribed by him years ago, suggested lingering ties. But his feet were small, size 8, no match for the print. Clara the housemaid was questioned in the servants' hall for discretion, but Miss Marple listened from the adjoining pantry, ear to the door like in her cottage, eavesdropping on gossips. Clara twisted her apron. Loved Miss Eleanor, she was kind, tipped, generous. I prepared her room, locked the door myself after. But a row 2 days prior. Eleanor accusing Clara of pilfering a brooch, later found misplaced. A misunderstanding, Clara insisted, and her familiarity with Victor, overheard giggles in the pantry weeks ago, an affair perhaps. Motive, jealousy if Eleanor knew? Tom Wilkins, the gardener, limped in gruffly, cap in hand, his war limp pronounced on the Persian rug. In me cottage all night, alone as always. Craddock eyed him. Complaints from the deceased. You lurked, stared. Tom spat tobacco juice into a spittoon, uncouth, earning Mrs. Hargreaves' later ire. City miss imagined things, I tend the grounds, that's all. His shed, searched, held a scarf similar to the murder weapon. Coarse wool, but Eleanor's was silk. Red herring? His boots, size 10, muddy always. And a grudge from the war. Lost a brother to Jeffrey's father, shipping delays in supplies, muttered in the pub. A cryptic note, unearthed in Eleanor's dressing table. Scribbled in her elegant hand, beware the shepherd's shadow, secrets unearthed. Shadow, the hut's location, or a person? Reverend Thorne's sermon on shepherds? Tom's domain? The room's enigmas deepened the probe. No hidden passages, walls tapped by experts from town, solid as the estate's foundations. The balcony bolt intact, windows sealed with fresh paint from recent renovations. A missing key to the suite's side drawer, found later in Jeffrey's pocket during a pat-down. Fell from her hand, perhaps, he stammered. False clue or planted? Autopsy preliminary. Death by strangulation, midnight approximate, body moved post-mortem. Lividity suggested repositioning. Scream at midnight, but cold by dawn. Timing off? Red herrings abounded. A family curse invoked by Uncle Victor. The vanishing bride legend. Ghost took her. A stolen jewel from the safe. The sapphires. Missing post-murder. Pinned eyes on Clara or Amelia. Whispers of Eleanor's secret lover in London. A telegram arrived, unsigned. Meet if needed. Miss Marple interjected softly during a break over tea with Craddock. Inspector, in my village, alibis crack like eggshells. Note the timings. Scream, but death earlier. Perhaps a gramophone recording or mimicry. Craddock grunted approval. Sharp, miss, but who benefits most? Evening fell, interrogations pausing for supper. Soup and bread, appetites slain. Suspects scattered. Jeffrey drowning sorrow in whiskey. Amelia weeping in the chapel. Victor in the billiards with a decanter. Clara confided in Miss Marple in the kitchen. Strange noises earlier, scratching at walls. Clues piled like autumn leaves. Muddy print, Tom or Victor? Torn lace, Amelia? Notes warning. Similar scarf, misplaced key, old love letter. Motives clear. Jeffrey's money woes, Amelia's envy, Victor's debts, Thorne's rejection, Clara's grudge, Tom's stare. But logic demanded more. Miss Marple knitted faster, piecing, "The impossible often hides the simple disguised." Chapter 5. Deepening Mysteries and Alliances. Ah, dear listeners, we're well into the weave of our tapestry now, where threads tangle and untangle in the most bewildering fashion. Chapter 4 laid out the suspects like cards on a table, each with their motives and alibis glinting under the inspector's lamp. But mysteries like gardens need tending. Clues sprout unexpectedly, alliances form in the shade, and twists lurk like weeds. In this chapter, we'll watch the investigation burrow deeper. Complications arise like storm clouds over the Wiltshire Downs, and Miss Marple begin to ally with the forces of law. It's a slow, deepening layer by layer, perfect for unwinding on a quiet evening. If you're piecing it together already, bravo. Share your guesses in the comments. Which suspect's secret would shock you most? A deep breath. Perhaps imagine the scent of wood smoke from Shepherd's Croft's hearths. And let's continue. The days following Eleanor's grim discovery blurred into a haze of gray skies and grayer moods at Shepherd's Croft. The estate, once abuzz with wedding joy, now echoed with hollow footsteps and murmured suspicions. Rain pattered incessantly on the mullioned windows, turning the gravel drives to muck and the Crofts' fields into quagmires that swallowed boot heels. Inspector Craddock had taken residence in the East Wing, his pipe smoke permeating the corridors like a perpetual fog, while Constable Perkins tramped about with his measuring tape and eternal notebook, interviewing staff for the third time. The shepherd's hut was cordoned off with police tape, a modern innovation that seemed out of place amid the ancient stones, and a photographer from the county constabulary had snapped images of the scene, flashbulbs popping like distant gunfire. Geoffrey Hargreaves bore his grief like a ill-fitting suit, wandering the library in a daze, fingers tracing the spines of books he had no heart to read. The room, with its towering shelves of vellum-bound volumes on estate management and fox-hunting lore, became his refuge. He pored over ledgers late into the nights, the estate's debts laid bare. Mortgages on the shipping remnants, Uncle Victor's IOUs stacked like poker chips. If only she'd lived, he confided to Miss Marple one drizzly afternoon, rain lashing the French windows. Her inheritance, a tidy sum from her father's legal practice, would have shored us up. But his eyes, red-rimmed and distant, held more than sorrow. A flicker of relief? The alliance between groom and sister deepened in this vacuum. Amelia, pale and withdrawn, joined him often, their heads bent together over tea trays. "We'll manage, brother," she murmured, but Miss Marple, passing with her eternal knitting basket, overheard whispers of the will and unexpected clauses. Indeed, a solicitor from London arrived by train on the second day, a pince-nez spectacled man named Mr. Finchley, clutching a briefcase like a talisman. In the drawing room, amid the faded brocades and ancestral portraits whose eyes seemed to follow, he unveiled Eleanor's last will and testament, drafted hastily post-engagement. "To my fiancé Geoffrey, the bulk, £50,000 in trusts," he intoned. But a codicil added mere weeks ago. "In event of foul play or untimely death before nuptials, a portion, 10,000 to Amelia Hargreaves, for her loyal companionship during my time here." Amelia gasped, hand to her throat, while Geoffrey's jaw tightened. Complication bloomed. If murder suspected, Amelia gained directly. "She insisted," Geoffrey explained later to Craddock. "Said Amelia deserved security, overshadowed as she was." Red herring or motive amplified? Amelia's tears flowed anew, but were they guilt or gratitude? Uncle Victor's secrets unraveled further in the billiard room, where green baize tables gathered dust under low-hanging lamps. Craddock cornered him there over a game of snooker, balls clicking like accusatory tongues. Your alibi crumbles, sir. The scullery maid saw you slip out at 11, before the scream. Victor chalked his cue with trembling hands, his portly frame deflating. All right. Was with Clara in the conservatory. Dalliance, you understand, been going on months. Didn't want Lydia knowing, scandal. Clara, summoned and blushing furiously in her starched apron, confirmed. Yes, sir. A moment of weakness. Miss Eleanor caught us once, nearly. Threatened to tell Mrs. Hargreaves. Jealousy if Eleanor had known and disapproved. Clara's motive twisted anew. Protect her position, or Victor's allowance which sustained her small luxuries? Miss Marple, ever the gentle inquisitor, wandered the estate's peripheries, chatting with servants over cups of tea in the vast kitchens where copper pots gleamed and the range roared. The room smelled of baking bread and onion soup, a comfort amid chaos. People confide in spinsters, she mused, eliciting tales from the scullery girls. One revealed Tom's shed held more than scarves, a bundle of love letters yellowed and tied with ribbon, addressed to Eleanor from years back. Not Thorne's, but another's, unsigned, postmarked London. Twist, Eleanor's secret admirer, perhaps a reason for flight or foul play. Out on the grounds, despite the mud, Miss Marple donned her mackintosh and strolled with Inspector Craddock, forming an unlikely alliance. He, gruff but respectful. Heard of your village exploits, Miss Marple. Shared findings over a thermos of coffee. The body's bruises, not just the neck, finger marks on arms as if restrained, and spectacles, wire-rimmed, found snagged in brambles near the hut. Matched the Reverend's prescription. Thorne, confronted in the chapel where stained glass cast colorful shadows on pews, stammered, Lost them days ago, must have dropped during the search. But his sermon notes, searched, held marginalia. Forgive my weakness, dated recently. Spurned love turned obsessive. He claimed a walk at dusk, but alibis thin. Complications mounted like the rain-swollen streams. The autopsy full report arrived, poison traces in Eleanor's teacup from the nightstand. Laudanum, enough to daze but not kill. Administered before strangulation, the doctor wired. Who had access? Clara prepared the nightly posset, or Amelia delivering a sisterly good night. Red herring, the sapphires, stolen from the safe, turned up in Tom's cottage loft, planted. He raged when accused. Frame up! I hated the city, miss. She planned to fell the old oaks for a motor garage, but murder, me leg barely carries me a mile. Miss Marple tested theories in the locked room, recreating with Craddock's help. See here, she pointed, standing on the balcony where wind whipped the ivy. Ropes? A pulley from the chimney? They experimented with string and weights, nothing fit without traces. The dumbwaiter in the adjoining pantry wall used for trays was probed, too narrow for a body but perhaps for lowering items. A scarf end snagged there, silk threads matching the murder weapon. Clue or coincidence? Alliances shifted. Geoffrey and Craddock clashed over searches, intruding on grief. While Amelia bonded with Thorne in prayer sessions, her confessions whispered in the chapel's confessional nook. Forgive me, Father, I envied her life. Overheard by Clara, fueling gossip. Uncle Victor allied with drink, his debts exposed fully. Owed bookies in London, Eleanor had refused a loan via Geoffrey. A new twist emerged from London. Eleanor's maid there wired of a visitor, a cousin disowned, seeking money. Dead end or accomplice? Miss Marple pondered over evening cocoa with the inspector in the library, fire crackling. Human nature, Inspector, like in St. Mary Mead, the postmistress and the forged check, secrets compound. Night fell with thunder, lightning illuminating the Croft like flashes of revelation. A scream echoed again, not human but a fox in the woods. yet it jolted suspects anew. Geoffrey confronted Amelia. "That codicil! Did you know?" Tears and denials. Clues deepened. Mud on the balcony railing, overlooked before. Handprints. The note, "Shepherds." Shadow decoded perhaps as Tom's hut domain, or Victor's shady deals. Reverend's spectacles, lens cracked as if in struggle. Miss Marple allied fully now, sharing village parallels. The locked room is illusion, focus on movement post-death. Craddock nodded, pipe glowing. Complications, a false confession brewed. Clara, protecting Victor, hinted at seeing Tom. Red herring wave, the mystery burrowed, alliances fragile, twists coiling. Who gained from the poison days, how body transported unmarked. Chapter 6, The Gathering Storm. We're reaching the crescendo now, dear listeners, where the clouds of suspicion gather thick and ominous over Shepherd's Croft, much like the tempest brewing outside its ancient windows. The previous chapters have layered clue upon clue, motive upon motive, until the air fairly crackles with tension. In this gathering storm of Chapter 6, accusations will fly like hailstones, cracking alibis and exposing fissures in the household's facade. We'll see confrontations build to a fever pitch, new revelations flash like lightning, and Miss Marple's quiet observations begin to illuminate the shadows. It's a deliberate build-up, savoring the drama as a fine wine, perfect for losing yourself in on a blustery evening. If the suspense is mounting for you, do share in the comments. At what point would you have called for the gathering of all suspects? A blanket, a biscuit, and let's press on into the gale. The third day after the murder dawned sodden and sullen, the Wiltshire rain lashing the estate like an avenging fury, turning paths to rivulets and the Croft into a sodden sponge. Water dripped from the eaves of Shepherd's Croft, pattering on the slate roof like impatient fingers, while inside, tempers simmered hotter than the kitchen range. Inspector Craddock, his tweed suit rumpled from sleepless nights, paced the drawing room with his pipe clenched unlit. Smoking banned near evidence piles. Stacks of statements, photographs of the hut, and the autopsy sketches cluttered the Chippendale tables, a stark contrast to the room's usual elegance of porcelain shepherdesses and embroidered screens. The household had fractured into uneasy camps. Geoffrey and Mrs. Hargreaves in one corner clinging to propriety. Amelia and Reverend Thorne seeking solace in the chapel's dim sanctity. Uncle Victor and Clara exchanging furtive glances in the servants' quarters, their secret alliance fraying under scrutiny. Tom Wilkins kept to the potting shed, his limp more pronounced in the damp, tools clanging as if venting his rage. Miss Marple, the calm eye in this storm, moved between them like a gentle zephyr, her knitting a scarf now nearing completion, each stitch a thought, each row a connection. Tensions ignited at breakfast in the dining room where silver domes covered congealing eggs and kippers, steam mingling with the rain's chill seeping through cracks. Mrs. Hargreaves, her iron-gray bun tighter than ever, presided at the head, her black bombazine dress a shroud of mourning. "We must present a united front," she declared, spooning tea with a hand that betrayed a slight quiver. Geoffrey, hollow-eyed across from her, slammed down his cup. "United? While Eleanor's killer sups among us?" His gaze swept the table. Amelia picking at toast, Victor nursing a hangover with black coffee, Thorne murmuring grace over untouched porridge. Amelia flared first, her pale face flushing uncharacteristically. "And you, brother, benefiting most from her death. That codicil was your idea, perhaps, to frame me?" The room froze. Even the footman paused mid-serve. Geoffrey rose, chair scraping. "How dare you? I loved her. You envied her from the start, snipping at her heels like a jealous pup." Inspector Craddock, entering with Perkins in tow, seized the moment. "Tempers, please. But since we're all here, He gestured, and the accusations cascaded like the downpour outside. Uncle Victor boomed next, his mustache bristling. Frame, ha! Look to the gardener, Tom skulking about, his shed full of incriminating bits. That similar scarf, the mud everywhere. Tom, summoned from the door where he'd been eavesdropping, limped in fury. Lies. You lot with your fine manners. Miss Vance planned to sack me for them oaks, but I didn't touch her. Clara, serving refills, interjected tearfully. Nor Victor. He was with me, innocent as babes. Reverend Thorne crossed himself, voice quavering. Slander begets sin. Yet, I saw shadows that night, a figure in white on the moors before the scream. Gasps rippled. Craddock pounced. Before midnight, why withheld? The storm of blame peaked in the library later that morning, rain hammering the bay windows as Craddock gathered the principals amid leather-bound tomes and the faint scent of mildew. Lightning flashed, illuminating dust motes like fleeting clues. Alibis collapse, he growled. Jeffrey accused Tom outright. Your boots matched the print, carried her body in a wheelbarrow, no footprints. Tom retorted. And your debts, sir? Poison in her cup, you brought the laudanum for your headaches. Amelia turned on Clara. You prepared the posset, slipped the drug, then strangled her for your lover Victor. Clara sobbed. Never, though I heard scratching in the walls like rats or worse. Victor blustered at Thorne. Holy man! Your spectacles at the scene followed her rejected suitor? Thorne paled. A walk for contemplation, but yes, I loved her once, perhaps too much. Confessions tumbled. Thorne admitted writing anonymous letters post-rejection, begging reconciliation. Amelia confessed hiding Eleanor's diary, found later, entries on family secrets and fearing the shepherd's shadow, now interpreted as the hut or a metaphor for lurking danger. Miss Marple, seated quietly by the fireplace where logs hissed in the damp, interjected softly. Arguments cloud judgment like this weather. Consider timings. The scream at 12, but a witness saw the yo-yo figure at 11. The new witness, old Shepherd Jenkins, a local crofter who tended adjacent fields, trudged in soaked cap dripping. Interviewed in the warmth, he grumbled, Aye, round 11, moonlit gap in clouds, figure in white nightgown, flittin' toward the hut. Thought it a ghost, like the legend. Twist electrified. Before the scream, Eleanor, or her double, outside. Illusion? Body moved earlier, scream faked. Craddock's eyes gleamed. The gramophone in the library. Eleanor owned records. A recording? Search revealed a portable player in her luggage with a disc of operatic arias, including a soprano's shriek. Played back, it mimicked the cry eerily. Staged to cover earlier events, Craddock deduced. Alliances strained, Jeffrey and Amelia united against outsiders, hugging tearfully. Forgive me, sis. But Miss Marple noted Amelia's dry eyes. Clara allied with Victor openly now, defending him. He couldn't climb balconies, his girth. Yet a ladder in the stables borrowed that night per log. By whom? Complications swirled with the wind howling through chimneys. The dumbwaiter theory revisited. Threads from the scarf caught, but also a button. Amelia's from her dress. Fell off earlier, she claimed. Mud on balcony analyzed as from the Croft's specific clay. Not garden soil, transported how? A revelation struck via telegram. Eleanor's London solicitor clarified the codicil, witnessed by Thorne, who advised on charitable clauses. Conflict. He denied undue influence. Evening brought the peak confrontation in the drawing room, thunder rumbling like divine judgment. Craddock assembled all, rain a curtain outside. The figure at 11, Eleanor alive then, killed in hut, body. No, wait, Miss Marple murmured to him aside. Or killed in room, dummy figure. Accusations crescendoed. Tom blamed Jeffrey. Poison from your medicinals, Jeffrey retorted at Amelia. Diary mentions your threats. Amelia screamed at Clara. You spied for Mother. Victor at Thorne. Hypocrite embezzling church funds. Eleanor knew. Twist. Bank records showed Thorne's discrepancies. Eleanor, a donor, discovered. He crumpled. She confronted me days ago. Promised silence for repentance. Storm raged, power flickering, lights out briefly, screams anew. When restored, a note slipped under door. Truth in the hut, midnight. Forgery? Trap? Miss Marple allied deeper with Craddock, sharing tea in the study. Like the St. Mary Mead forgery, the timing's key. The white figure, accomplice in nightgown. Gathering dispersed uneasily, suspicions peaked. Uncle Victor's alibi cracked fully. He left Clara at 11:30 for a smoke. Tom's shed, rope fibers matching possible lowering device. The storm mirrored the chaos, revelations flashing. Fake scream via gramophone, early sighting, Thorne's secret. But who orchestrated? Lightning cracked, illuminating paths to truth. Miss Marple knitted, mind storming ahead. Chapter 7, Unlikely Alliances and False Leads. The storm that raged through the night left Shepherd's Croft battered but unbroken, dear listeners, much like the fragile alliances forming within its walls. Chapter 6's thunderous accusations have echoed into a deceptive calm, where false leads sprout like mushrooms after rain, and unlikely partnerships emerge from the muddle. We'll navigate these twists slowly, watching Miss Marple weave her web of wisdom with Inspector Craddock, while red herrings lead us astray and confessions tease the truth without revealing it. It's the calm before the final revelation, perfect for pondering over a warm scone. If these misdirections have you second-guessing, tell me in the comments. Have you ever followed a false clue in a mystery book? Snuggle in, and let's trace these winding paths. Dawn broke pale and sodden on the fourth day, the estate's gardens dripping like weepers at a funeral, puddles reflecting the gray sky in fractured mirrors. The rain had ceased, but its legacy lingered, flooded paths, sodden lawns, and a chill that seeped into bones and spirits alike. Inside, the house stirred uneasily, servants whispering over breakfast preparations, the scent of bacon and toast a feeble attempt at normalcy. Inspector Craddock, his eyes baggy from poring over notes by candlelight during the outage, convened with Miss Marple in the library at first light. The room, with its mahogany shelves groaning under volumes of forgotten lore and the faint mustiness of damp pages, became their sanctum. "You've a knack, Miss Marple," Craddock grunted, relighting his pipe with a spill from the fire. The flames crackled merrily, casting dancing shadows on hunting prints and globe stands. "Village wisdom, eh? Like that business with the poisoned vicar in your parts." Miss Marple smiled faintly, her knitting needles resuming their rhythmic click, a booty now for the church bazaar back home. "Oh, Inspector, villages are microcosms of the world. People hide behind lace curtains, but truths slip out like cats at night. Take this gramophone scream, clever misdirection. And the white figure at 11, not Eleanor perhaps, but a Confederate drawing attention. Their alliance solidified over strong coffee and buttered toast, unlikely as a bulldog and a tabby, yet effective. Craddock shared forensics. Laudanum in the tea, definitely before strangulation, but the dose, sedative, not lethal, knocked her out for the kill. Miss Marple nodded. Like Mrs. Price's sleeping draft in St. Mary Mead used to cover a burglary. Who had access? Clara with the posset or Amelia with her good night visits? False leads abounded that morning, diverting the investigation like streams after the storm. Constable Perkins burst in, mud splattered from the grounds. "Sir, poison vial in Tom's shed, laudanum half empty." Tom Wilkins hauled in like a sodden sack, roared denials in the servants' hall, his grizzled face thunderous under the low beams where hams hung curing. Planted, I swear. That shed's open to all, jealous lot framing me for them oaks she wanted cut. Craddock pressed, your war grudge, Hargreaves shipping delayed supplies, your brother died at Ypres. Tom spat, aye, curse the name, but strangle a lass? Me leg won't carry me far. His alibi held watery, alone in his cottage, but a neighbor saw his light on till late. Miss Marple listening from the doorway with a tray of tea, her excuse for eavesdropping, noted his scarred hands, strong enough for knots, yet trembling now. Red herring? The vial's label. From a London chemist Eleanor frequented. Lead or plant. Geoffrey Hargreaves allied briefly with the law that afternoon, volunteering his medicine cabinet in his bedroom. A gentleman's retreat of oak paneling, sporting trophies, and a view of the stables. Search away, clear my name. Found. His own laudanum for headaches, but full bottle. Gratitude or deflection? He confided in Miss Marple on the terrace, wind whipping the cedars. Eleanor and I quarreled bitterly 2 nights before over money changes. I stormed out but returned to apologize. She forgave, or said she did. Complication. A witness, the stable boy, overheard raised voices at 10, Geoffrey threatening, you'll regret this modernization. Amelia bonding with Clara in the conservatory amid the humid scent of orchids and wet earth, turned informant unwittingly. Pruning shears snipped as she whispered, Clara, you saw Uncle Victor that night. Tell them, clear him. Clara, wiping soil from her hands, nodded. I missed till 11:30. But then, he slipped to the billiards. False lead. Victor's cufflink found in the locked room glinting under the bed during a re-sweep. Must have dropped earlier, he blustered when confronted in the drawing room, sunlight filtering through cleaned windows. But his debts deepened the motive. Bookie's letters demanded payment. Eleanor's dowry the blockage. Reverend Thorne's false trail led to the chapel, where incense lingered and pews creaked under Miss Marple's exploratory sit. His embezzlement confirmed by church wardens via telegram. Funds diverted for personal crises. Eleanor discovered, he confessed to Craddock in the vestry, voice echoing off stone. Confronted me privately, threatened exposure, but I prayed for forgiveness, not murder. His spectacles matched to the hut brambles, explained as a walk, but a torn hymnal page in Eleanor's pocket. His handwriting, a biblical verse on betrayal. Red herring strengthened, yet his frail frame unlikely for body transport. Unlikely pairings emerged. Uncle Victor and Tom shared a pipe in the potting shed, grumbling classes uniting against uppity police. Frame jobs everywhere, Victor muttered. Overheard by Perkins, sparking a search yielding rope in Tom's loft, coiled, fibrous, possible for lowering from balcony. For gardening, Tom growled. Alliance cracked when Victor accused, you lurked near her walks. Obsessed, Mrs. Hargreaves allied, with Geoffrey poring over estate papers in her boudoir, a feminine space of chintz and lavender sachets. Protect the family name, she urged, but Miss Marple, bringing posset for her nerves, glimpsed a letter, her own to Eleanor warning unsuitable match, leave my son. Motive maternal? Evening brought a cascade of false confessions and leads. Clara, cornered in the kitchen amid bubbling pots, cracked, I saw Amelia in the corridor at midnight, nightgown, hurried. Amelia denied furiously in the drawing-room firelight. Lies. I was ill, laudanum myself for nerves. But her button in the dumbwaiter, snagged on a tray. Craddock tested the balcony with rope and dummy, a bolster from bedding. Miss Marple observing lowered possible, but noise. Muffled by storm, footprints washed away, convenient. A jewel lead falsified. The sapphires, stolen, discovered in Thorne's Bible. Returned anonymously. He swore innocence, temptation to sell for debts. Miss Marple shared parallels with Craddock over supper, sole and potatoes, eaten hurriedly. Like the verger's theft, false clues point away from truth. Focus on the scream's purpose. Diversion. Night fell, alliances shifting. Geoffrey confided in Thorne's spiritual woes. Amelia sought Clara's comfort, extracting more sightings. False leads piled, poison sourced to Geoffrey's cabinet, after all, mismatched bottles. A love token in Tom's possession, Eleanor's handkerchief embroidered. The web tightened, misdirections peaking. Truth glimmered but elusive. Miss Marple knitted, allying wisdom with law. Patience, Inspector, like unraveling wool. And pause on these deceptions, listeners. Leads misleading as will-o'-the-wisps. Which false clue fooled you? Comment and brace for clarity ahead. Warm Dreams. Chapter 8. The Breaking Point. As the storm's echoes fade, dear listeners, we arrive at the breaking point. The moment where the weight of secrets becomes too heavy for the fragile structures of deceit to bear. Chapter 7's maze of false leads and shifting alliances has stretched nerves taut as bowstrings, and now, in this pivotal chapter, confessions crack open like thunderclaps. Clues converge in the locked room's shadows, and Miss Marple's gentle probing shatters illusions. We'll savor the tension slowly, watching the household fracture under pressure, with emotional outbursts and revelations that pivot us toward the truth. It's the unraveling before the grand reveal, ideal for a fireside contemplation. If you're feeling the strain alongside our characters, share in the comments. What's your breaking point in a tough mystery? When do you flip to the end? A steadying breath, perhaps a spot of brandy imagined, and let's witness the crumble. The 5th day at Shepherd's Croft dawned with a fragile clarity, the post-storm sun piercing the clouds like tentative fingers of light, gilding the wet leaves and turning puddles into mirrors that reflected the estate's weary facade. The air was crisp, laced with the earthy petrichor of soaked soil and the distant lowing of sheep on the Croft. Sounds of normalcy clashing against the unnatural pall inside. Servants moved with hushed efficiency, polishing silver that no longer gleamed with wedding promise, while the scent of frying bacon from the kitchens mingled uneasily with the lingering tobacco from Inspector Craddock's endless pipe. Tensions, bottled like the estate's fine wines, reached their fermentation peak in the breakfast room, where the long oak table, set with Wedgwood china and linen napkins, hosted a meal no one truly tasted. Mrs. Hargreaves, her severe bun fraying at the edges like her composure, buttered toast with mechanical precision. Geoffrey paced behind her, his fair hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot from another sleepless night haunted by what-ifs. Amelia sat opposite, twisting her napkin into knots, while Uncle Victor slurped coffee loudly, his ruddy face etched with hangover lines. Reverend Thorne picked at eggs, murmuring prayers, and Clara hovered with the teapot, her sturdy frame tense. It was Geoffrey who shattered the silence first, slamming a fist on the table that rattled the cups. "Enough skulking. Clara, you hinted at seeing Tom. Spit it out." His voice, raw with grief and suspicion, echoed off the paneled walls adorned with stag hunts and family crests. Clara paled, teapot trembling. I didn't want to say, sir, but yes, Tom lurked near the balcony that evening, pruning roses late, he claimed. Tom Wilkins, summoned from the gardens where he'd been raking leaves into sodden piles, limped in muddied boots, his grizzled beard bristling. Lies from a jealous tart. I was in me shed by 10. Ask the stable lad. But the breaking point rippled outward. Uncle Victor rose unsteadily, pointing a sausage-like finger. "And you, Geoffrey lad, quarreled with her fierce, I heard. Threatened her over them debts." The room erupted, accusations flying like autumn leaves in a gale. Amelia burst into tears. "Stop it! It was me. I hid in her wardrobe once, listening to her calls to London. She had a lover there, planning to elope." Falsehood or half-truth? Geoffrey lunged across the table. You poisonous snake, jealous to the end. Mrs. Hargreaves fainted dramatically into her chair, revived with salts by Clara, who whispered apologies. Inspector Craddock, alerted by Perkins, herded them to the drawing room for containment, the space now a pressure cooker of emotions. Sunlight streamed through the French windows, illuminating dust motes and strained faces on the brocade sofas. "Order!" he barked, pipe forgotten. Miss Marple, entering with her knitting, a mittens pair now for winter's approach, observed quietly from a wing-back chair, her blue eyes missing nothing. The way Amelia's hands shook, Thorne's averted gaze. Geoffrey's confession tumbled out under Craddock's steady gaze, the breaking point for the groom. Sinking to the carpet, knees buckling, he sobbed. "All right. I quarreled that night, yes, at 11 before retiring. She wanted to call off the wedding. Said the family's secret suffocated her, the debts, the affairs. I grabbed her arm, bruises perhaps. But I left, swore innocence, loved her truly. Innocent of murder. The timing aligned with the shepherd's sighting. The white figure could be Eleanor fleeing the row, dazed by argument. But the laudanum? My bottle. She borrowed for nerves weeks ago. Amelia cracked next, confronted with the diary Miss Marple had subtly returned to Craddock, found in her room's lining. Pages fluttered open, entries on Amelia's resentment boils. Stole my brooch to frame me? Amelia wailed. Yes, I took it. Wanted her gone, inheritance, attention. Hid in the dumbwaiter once, spying. But kill? No. Her button there, the torn lace, self-incriminating plants, or guilt's overflow. The locked room's enigmas demanded reenactment, pulling focus amid the chaos. Craddock, with Miss Marple's alliance, gathered props, ropes from the stables, the gramophone from Eleanor's trunk. In the suite, still sealed with police tape, the air stale with spilled kerosene and faded perfume, they tested theories. Geoffrey demonstrated the door's force, shouldering it as on the night. Key inside, impossible entry. Miss Marple pointed delicately. Or exit, the scream, play the record. Craddock wound the machine, needle scratching. A diva's wail emanated muffled through the door, eerily similar. Staged post-murder, she mused. But the body move. Mud on the balcony railing, hands smudged. Lowered with rope, perhaps coiled around the chimney pot. Fibers matched Tom's, but common. Uncle Victor broke fully in the billiard room, cue clattering as Craddock pressed. Damn it! I slipped out after Clara, yes. Saw a light in Eleanor's room at 11:30, thought Geoffrey, but more, heard scraping like furniture shifted. Affair exposed fully to Mrs. Hargreaves, who slapped him across the face in the hall, her matriarch mask crumbling. You fool ruined us! Reverend Thorne's turn came in the chapel, bells tolling noon somberly. Kneeling at the altar, he confessed to Craddock and Miss Marple. The embezzlement, yes, Eleanor knew. But I returned the sapphires to the safe myself, anonymously. Remorse. False lead dissolved, but his verse in her pocket. A plea for silence. Clara's outburst in the kitchen's pots boiling over. Victor and we argued that night. He wanted to confront Eleanor about a loan denial. I followed, saw Tom on the grounds. Tom dragged in, swung a fist at air. Enough! I confess I stared at her, I lusted even. War broke me, but the rope? For tying bundles, not bodies. Emotional fractures peaked in the evening assembly, fire roaring in the grate as dusk fell early. Mrs. Hargreaves accused all. This house cursed. Geoffrey embraced Amelia despite betrayal. Family sticks. Thorne prayed aloud, voices joining in fractured hymn. Miss Marple pieced, quietly to Craddock over sherry. The mud, Croft clay on railing, Body lowered, carted via wheelbarrow from stables, tracks washed by rain. Gramophone set on timer? No. Accomplice wounded. Breakings revealed Jeffrey's quarrel confirmed by stable boy. Amelia's spying via dumbwaiter scratches. False scarves, planted jewels. All distractions. The point broke wide. A hidden note in the gramophone. Eleanor's hand. If harm, suspect the shadow. Storm's aftermath cleared paths. Literally a barrow rut found under leaves. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Human frailty breaks strongest facades. And there we teeter at the fracture, listeners. Confessions pouring like the recent rains. Whose break moves you? Comment. And steel for the close. Restful revelations ahead. Chapter 9. The final clues. Here we are, dear listeners, at the precipice of revelation where the scattered threads of our mystery begin to weave into a discernible pattern, like sunlight piercing the lingering fog over the Wiltshire Downs. Chapter 8's emotional fractures have left the household raw and exposed, confessions hanging in the air like the scent of damp earth after the storm. In this penultimate chapter, we'll gather those final clues, the overlooked whispers, the subtle inconsistencies, that Miss Marple has been patiently collecting, much as one might harvest late autumn apples. It's a deliberate assembly, building suspense with each piece slotting into place, preparing us for the grand denouement. Perfect for a moment of quiet reflection. Imagine the crackle of a hearth as we delve deeper. If these closing hints have you leaning forward, share in the comments. What overlooked detail in a mystery has surprised you most? A pause for tea, perhaps, and let's uncover the last secrets of Shepherd's Croft. The 6th day dawned crisp and clear, the post-storm clarity extending beyond the weather to the investigation itself, though the inhabitants of the estate remained shrouded in uncertainty. Sunlight streamed through the mullioned windows of Shepherd's Croft, casting long shadows across the checkerboard floors and illuminating dust motes that danced like elusive clues. The gardens outside sparkled with dew on spiderwebs, and the Croft's sheep grazed peacefully, oblivious to the human drama. Inside, however, the air hummed with anticipation. Inspector Craddock's footsteps echoed purposefully down corridors, his pipe smoke trailing like a hound on the scent. Miss Marple arose early, as was her habit, slipping into a sensible tweed skirt and cardigan before venturing to the breakfast room where the family picked at kedgeree and toast in strained silence. Her presence, unassuming as ever, was a comforting constant amid the chaos. Her knitting basket accompanied her everywhere, now holding a half-finished pair of gloves that symbolized her methodical piecing together of the puzzle. Mornings bring clarity, she murmured to herself, observing Geoffrey's hunched shoulders as he stared into his coffee, Amelia's red-rimmed eyes darting nervously, and Uncle Victor nursing a headache with aspirin dissolved in water. Inspector Craddock joined her shortly, having spent the night reviewing timelines scribbled on foolscap. Over a private word in the conservatory, where the glass panes steamed slightly from the warmth of tropical plants and the sun's rays, he shared his frustrations. The brakes yesterday cracked shells, but no yolk yet, Miss Marple. Geoffrey's quarrel, Amelia's spying, all damning, but the how eludes us. Miss Marple nodded, her blue eyes twinkling behind spectacles. The how often hides in the wise shadow, Inspector. Like in St. Mary Mead, where the missing brooch was pinned on the maid, but truly slid into a hem during a fitting. Let's revisit the room with fresh eyes. Their alliance, now as natural as bread and butter, led them back to Eleanor's suite, the door's splintered lock repaired temporarily with a latch. The room had been preserved as a crime scene, the bed stripped, the overturned lamp righted, but the atmosphere still heavy with unspoken violence. Craddock poked at the balcony doors, bolted firm, while Perkins measured anew the drop to the flagstones below. Miss Marple, ever observant, knelt by the wardrobe, a massive oak piece with carved roses and ample space inside. "Spacious enough for hiding," she noted, echoing Amelia's confession. But deeper inspection yielded a final clue, a faint scratch on the inner panel, as if fingernails had clawed in panic. Eleanor fought here, before the laudanum fully took hold. Moving to the dressing table, its marble top cluttered with powders and pins under police seal, Miss Marple lifted the jewelry box with gloved hands, borrowed from Craddock. Inside, amid pearls and cameos, lay a hidden compartment, triggered by a false bottom revealed when she pressed a decorative knob. Out tumbled a series of letters bound with ribbon. Not Thorne's pleas, but Reverend Silas Thorne's embezzlement records, photocopied ledgers from the church accounts. "She was investigating," Craddock breathed. "Blackmail material?" Thorne summoned post-haste to the library, where bookshelves loomed like judgmental sentinels crumbled upon sight of them. Seated in a leather armchair, the fire popping softly, he removed his spectacles and wiped them shakily. "Yes. Eleanor discovered my indiscretions weeks ago. She was a generous donor to the parish. A misplaced receipt led her to question. I admitted diverting funds for gambling debts. Post-war vices, you see. She promised discretion if I repaid anonymously. But murder? No, I was in prayer when the scream came." His motive solidified, silence at any cost. Yet a discrepancy. His frail hands, arthritic from years at the altar, unlikely to strangle with the scarf's tight knots. The clue pointed, but not conclusively. Perhaps an accomplice. Downstairs in the kitchens, where the range roared and the smell of baking bread provided a homely contrast, Clara was questioned again amid the clatter of pots. Miss Marple, offering a sympathetic ear over a cup of tea, drew out more. "The posset I prepared, yes, with laudanum from Miss Eleanor's own bottle. She requested it for nerves." But a new detail emerged. "That night I saw Miss Amelia near the dumbwaiter earlier carrying a tray up. Said it was hot milk, but—" Clara trailed off, loyalty warring with truth. The dumbwaiter, a narrow shaft from kitchen to suite for meal service, was re-examined. Inside, traces of silk fibers from the scarf and a smudge of Croft mud. Final proof of body transport. Small for a corpse, but folded limp form possible post-rigor. Jeffrey's breaking continued in the stables, where hay scented the air and horses nickered softly. Confronted with the wheelbarrow rut, uncovered by Tom raking storm debris, he admitted, "I borrowed it that afternoon for logs, but anyone could." His quarrel confirmed by a groom's eavesdrop. Eleanor threatening to expose the estate's insolvency to her London cousins, potentially scuttling the marriage. She had a codicil draft in her drawer, leaving to charity if debts hidden. Clue: the will's evolution, motive for haste. Uncle Victor provided an unwitting final piece in the billiard room, chalking a cue absently as Craddock pressed. Scratching sounds. Aye, more like sliding. The dumbwaiter pulley squeaks something awful. Combined with the gramophone. Wound and placed in the wardrobe, needle set to drop at midnight via a string timer. Ingenious, explaining the delayed scream while murder occurred earlier. Out on the Croft, Miss Marple walked with Craddock to the shepherd's hut. The stone structure now less foreboding in daylight, brambles trimmed back. Inside, the dirt floor yielded under poking. A loose flagstone hid a small cache, Eleanor's personal notebook, buried hastily. Pages detailed Amelia's jealousy, overheard plans to sabotage wedding dress, Clara's affair with V, blackmail potential, and crucially, body moved post-mortem, lividity shows rollover, strangled in room, transported via DW and Barrow. Amelia, confronted in the chapel amid stained glass and incense, wept. I argued yes, tore her lace in a scuffle days before. But the note Shepherd's shadow? My room overlooks the Croft. She called me that, mocking my pallor. Shadow clue resolved. Not legend, but sibling taunt. Tom's limp exonerated him partially, couldn't haul, but his rope matched balcony fibers. Loan to Clara for drying laundry, he grunted. Evening gathered all final threads in the drawing room, firelight flickering on faces. Mrs. Hargreaves revealed Eleanor confided fears of Amelia's resentment. Thorne's ledgers, Amelia's diary entries, the notebook, all converged. Miss Marple to Craddock privately. The accomplice duo, jealousy and loyalty. Strangle in room pre-scream, gramophone timed. Lower via rope to barrow below, mud smudge. Cart to hut. Motive, inheritance shift and secret protection. Breaking point for truth. Clara confessed fully, saw everything, silent for love. Amelia did it, with my help covering. The clues finalized. Scratches from struggle, hidden docs on embezzlement, red herring leverage, mud transport, timed distraction. Resolution loomed, pieces locked. And there we assemble the puzzle's edge, listeners. Final clues clicking like lock tumblers. What hint sealed it for you? Comment and await the unveil. Satisfying sighs ahead. Chapter 10. The denouement. And now, dear listeners, we arrive at the satisfying close of our tale where the tangled knots of the vanishing bride of Shepherd's Croft finally unravel under Miss Marple's gentle but inexorable pull. Like the sun breaking fully through the Wiltshire clouds after a long storm, the truth emerges clear and illuminating, dispelling the shadows that have cloaked this impossible crime. In this final chapter, we'll gather in the drawing room for the classic revelation, explanations flowing as smoothly as afternoon tea, with every clue accounted for and justice poised to be served. It's a leisurely wrap-up, allowing us to linger on the logic and the human frailties revealed, perfect for reflection as the story concludes. If you've enjoyed this journey inspired by the Queen of Mystery herself, do like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Did the culprit surprise you, or had you suspected all along? Perhaps share where you're listening from one last time. A cozy sigh, and let's draw the curtains on this drama. The seventh day at Shepherd's Croft brought a hushed stillness, as if the estate itself held its breath for the unveiling. The autumn sun filtered through the drawing room's tall sash windows, casting golden pools on the Persian rugs and highlighting the intricate carvings of the mantelpiece where a fire crackled softly, warding off the morning chill. The room, once a stage for wedding preparations and tense interrogations, now served as the grand theater for truth. Inspector Craddock had arranged the chairs in a semicircle facing the fireplace, a nod to the classic gatherings of detection lore. Portraits of Hargreaves' ancestors gazed down sternly as if judging the proceedings, while side tables held decanters of sherry and plates of biscuits, civility amid revelation. Miss Marple sat modestly to the side, her knitting completed into a neat scarf folded in her lap, symbolizing the woven threads of the case. She had insisted on this assembly, whispering to Craddock the night before over cocoa in the library. People confess more freely when confronted collectively, Inspector. Like the Women's Institute meeting where the jam theft was exposed. Craddock, respecting her village-honed insight, agreed. The suspects filed in one by one. Geoffrey Hargreaves, pale but composed in his tweeds. Amelia, her mousy hair pinned severely, eyes downcast. Uncle Victor, portly and sweating slightly despite the cool air. Reverend Thorne, clutching his Bible like a shield. Clara, in her starched apron, hands clasped tightly. Tom Wilkins, cap in hand, limp pronounced, and Mrs. Lydia Hargreaves, ramrod straight in black bombazine, presiding over the tea tray as if it were a throne. Constable Perkins stood by the door, notebook ready, while Craddock cleared his throat, pipe laid aside for the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice gravelly but authoritative. We've chased shadows long enough. Thanks to Miss Marple's keen observations, the impossible vanishing is no longer a mystery. But I'll let her explain, step by step as these things should be. Miss Marple smiled faintly, her blue eyes surveying the room with kindly sharpness. Thank you, Inspector. In St. Mary Mead, we say mysteries are like knitting patterns. One dropped stitch unravels the whole. Here the pattern was clever, but human flaws left loose ends. Let us begin with the crime itself. Not a ghostly disappearance, but a meticulously staged murder disguised as an impossibility. She paused, letting the words settle like dust. Eleanor Vance was strangled in her room between 10:30 and 11 p.m. Not at midnight, as the scream suggested. The autopsy confirmed death hours before discovery, with lividity showing the body was moved post-mortem, rolled onto its side during transport. The laudanum in her tea, administered via the nightly posset Clara prepared, dazed her enough for the attack without resistance. Bruises on her arms from Jeffrey's quarrel earlier masked the restraining grip. But the killer was not Jeffrey, though his argument provided cover. Jeffrey shifted uncomfortably but nodded. I grabbed her in anger, yes, regret it bitterly. But I left at 11, slamming the door. Indeed, Miss Marple continued softly. The scream at midnight was a diversion, recorded on Eleanor's gramophone from her London areas. A soprano's wail timed with a string mechanism attached to the wardrobe door, triggered when the household stirred or by a pulled thread from below. The machine was hidden in the wardrobe wound earlier. Scratching sounds Uncle Victor heard, the pulley of the dumbwaiter shifting it into place. Uncle Victor blustered, mustache twitching. By gad, that squeak, I thought rats. Miss Marple inclined her head. Now the locked room. Eleanor locked her door habitually, key inside. But after strangulation with her own silk scarf, knotted tightly in a fit of rage, the body was concealed briefly in the wardrobe, scratches from her nails in panic before full sedation. The killer exited via the dumbwaiter, a narrow shaft from kitchen to suite used for trays. Large enough for a slight woman to squeeze through, especially one familiar with the house's quirks. Eyes turned to Amelia, who paled further. Me? Absurd. I was in my room. Not alone in this, Miss Marple replied gently. Amelia Hargreaves, you were the orchestrator, driven by jealousy and greed. Eleanor's diary, entries noted your resentment. The jewels, the attention overshadowing you for years. The codicil in her will leaving you 10,000 if foul play was your twisted justification, but truly, you feared her modern ways would disinherit you entirely upon marriage, cutting your allowance. You overheard her confrontation with Jeffrey, slipped in via the dumbwaiter after he left, your button snagged there, torn lace from an earlier scuffle. You dosed the posset yourself during a sisterly visit, then waited, strangling her in a jealous fury when she stirred. Amelia's hands flew to her throat, echoing the scarf's knot. Lies. I envied, yes, but murder? The evidence says otherwise, Inspector Craddock interjected, producing the notebook from the hut's hidden cache. Your own words buried there, plans to remove the interloper. The shepherd's shadow in her warning note. Your room overlooked the Croft. She mocked your lurking watchfulness. Tears streamed down Amelia's face, but Miss Marple pressed on relentlessly yet compassionately. After the deed, you needed transport. The body lowered from the balcony with gardening rope, fibers matching Tom's borrowed by your accomplice. Smeared mud on the railing from the Croft's clay, collected earlier. Bolted the doors from inside via a string pull, then descended the dumbwaiter back to the kitchen. The wheelbarrow from the stables, rut marks washed by rain but traced, carted her to the hut under cover of night, no footprints as wheels distributed weight on the soft ground post-storm. Uncle Victor gasped. Accomplice? Who? Clara, Miss Marple said softly, turning to the housemaid who sobbed quietly. Your loyalty to the family and to Victor's affair made you complicit. You prepared the posset genuinely but covered for Amelia, wound the gramophone, helped stage the empty bed, overturned lamp for chaos, and provided access. Eleanor's discovery of your dalliance with Victor, overheard threats to tell Mrs. Hargreaves, blackmailed you into silence and aid. Motive. Protect your position and lover who benefited from Eleanor's removal, loosening estate funds. Clara collapsed to her knees, apron bundling in her fists. Yes. Miss Amelia promised security. She was like a daughter to me, twisted as it was. Hid the sapphires in Thorne's Bible to mislead, planted the vial in Tom's shed, false trails everywhere. Reverend Thorne crossed himself, murmuring prayers, his embezzlement now a side note. Eleanor knew, but Amelia used it to sow doubt, hiding ledgers in the jewelry box. I was innocent of blood, he whispered, but guilty of weakness. Tom Wilkins grunted relief. Me rope, aye, but never touched her. Geoffrey stood heartbroken. Amelia, my sister? Mrs. Hargreaves wept silently, the matriarch undone. How could you? Amelia, breaking fully, confessed in a torrent. She had everything, beauty, freedom, Geoffrey's love. I was the shadow always. The wedding would exile me to spinsterhood. Clara helped for love of Uncle, who promised marriage if funds freed. We planned after her quarrel with Geoffrey. Perfect timing. Craddock signaled Perkins, Amelia Hargreaves, Clara Wilkins. You're under arrest for murder and accessory. Handcuffs clicked solemnly as the women were led away, Amelia's sobs echoing down the hall. Miss Marple concluded, the vanishing, illusion via staging, body and wardrobe till household asleep, then lowered at leisure. The early white figure sighting was Clara in a spare nightgown testing the path. Gramophone for alarm, ensuring discovery after transport. Motives intertwined, jealousy primary, secrets secondary. Human nature, you see. Like the village feud over a will where sisters turn bitter. Geoffrey thanked her brokenly. You've given closure, Miss Marple. The room dispersed. Thorne to repentance, Victor to disgrace, Tom to his gardens. As arrests processed and the estate quieted, Miss Marple departed by train, musing on the window. People are much the same. Ambition poisons wells. Justice served, the bride's ghost laid to rest.